Hi friends, welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to share my fountain pen collection with you and talk a little bit about what drew me into this hobby in the first place and how I went from my first pen and what were some of my deciding factors as a beginner to the last pen that I purchased, which was not too long ago. And as a follow-up to this video, which is just going to be focused on showing you the pens in my collection, next week I'm going to talk about how I'm managing my fountain pen collection as someone with ADHD who struggles with impulse control when it comes to hobbies that I am especially excited about. I was going to combine that into this video, but once I started researching the topic, I realized that I just have a lot of thoughts and I want to spend a bit more time reflecting on what I've learned so far, and I think it'll just be better suited for a separate video, so I took that part out and I'll be filming a follow-up to that after this one. Before I get started, I also just wanted to thank you so much for being here with me today. I just wanted to share a really quick InCoWriMo update. So this week I mailed out another 7 letters and we are going strong. Before we get into it, I wanted to invite you to grab yourself a tea or a coffee or your favorite beverage of choice. Today I have a tea with a little bit of milk, and the tea is one of my favorite Australian tea brands. It's called T2, and this particular flavor is Melbourne Breakfast. And I had to get my in-laws to send it to me because, as far as I know, I don't think you can get this tea in Canada. And sadly, it doesn't actually taste as good here. And I think it's because the water and milk is different in Australia. And so I really fell in love with this tea when I was drinking it in Australia, but I have to say it doesn't taste quite as good here. So anyway, on to my fountain pen collection. First, I want to recognize that having a collection of any sort is going to be completely personal and dependent on who the collection is for and level of interest or the topic or the subject matter. It could also depend on how much disposable income you have and how much you're willing to invest in this hobby, and also what your intentions are behind building a collection in the first place. I realized very early on in this hobby that if I went in with the mindset of trying to collect a lot of things, then I was going to be in a lot of trouble. So I had to let go of that idea of trying to have a full set of anything. And instead, I had to take a step back and really think about why I was getting into this hobby in the first place, what was drawing me towards it, and how I wanted to engage with the hobby. And for me, I have no shortage of hobbies. I am interested in so many different things. Even on this channel, if you go through my old videos, you will see that I have done painting videos. I went through a bullet journal phase. I also invest a lot of time and energy into trying to make decisions for our home and doing as much of it myself as I can. What that means is I do have to set boundaries around how much I'm willing to experiment within this hobby of fountain pens and how much I'm willing to spend, and being really intentional whenever I make a purchase decision. Have I always done that with the pens that I have acquired? Absolutely not. Not aiming for perfection here, just honesty and a good dose of self-reflection and self-awareness to inform my decisions moving forward. So a little bit about what drew me to fountain pens. One of the companies that I worked for in the past used to give their employees these pens when they joined. And then a few years later, a friend of mine knew that I really loved muji pens, and when she was doing a de-stash of ink refills, she gave me muji refills, and It took me probably close to 2 years of daily writing and note-taking to make it through all of the refills that she gave me, but they served me really well, and I actually really enjoyed reusing the pen bodies and changing the refills every time they ran out. As I was using them, a few things started to bother me a little. One was I found that sometimes when I would write with these pens for a really long time, my hand would ache, and so I bought some of these pen pillows to see if that would help, and it did. The other thing that bothered me was Muji over time changed the actual pen body itself, and so some of the refills that my friend gave me would only work with the older style of Muji pen, and some of them would only work with the newer ones. So that was a little bit irritating. And then the final thing was Muji obviously only has a certain number of pen ink colors, and while I do like to use different pen colors when I'm taking notes just for having certain words stand out and, you know, to use as headings or things like that, I was kind of getting bored of the standard blue and black ink, and I wanted to start trying out different types of ink. And honestly, when I finally finished my last refill, it really did take me a few years to get through, but when I finally got through them, I decided that I wanted to try getting a fountain pen, and I was hoping that a fountain pen would be a more sustainable option in terms of allowing me to refill it instead of me having to buy a new pen every time I ran out. It would also allow me the freedom to try different fountain pen inks. This is the Superior Labor pen roll, and this is the Superior Labor and Wonder Pens pen wallet. So I got this first and quickly filled it up, and then I decided to invest in the pen roll after because I was so in love with the Superior Labor products. But I have to admit, I don't love the pen roll as much in terms of it being like a daily driver. So I love this pen wallet so much because it kind of acts like a pencil case for me, but it also keeps my pens secure. So I can just easily access the pens that I'm using on a daily basis, and I just find it like it's quick and easy, and I love it. The pen roll, on the other hand, is a gorgeous artifact, and I love it. This is more so where I store the pens that I'm not currently using. This is where I'm storing the pens that I'm reaching for on a daily basis. So I'm gonna put this aside for now, but I had it here because I wanted to show that I have started dedicating a single pen to my diary or my journal, and I will come back to this specific pen in a bit. I wanted to start with a beginner pen because I was really overwhelmed with how much choice there was. And I think the perfectionist in me just was so worried about making the wrong decision that I decided to just go for a more affordable pen to start and have it be something that I still really liked, but felt comfortable spending money on and would allow me to use the first bottle of ink that I had decided I wanted to buy, which was the Wonder Pens and Ferris Wheel Press ink called Writing Desk. This is the Kaweco Sport in the Macchiato color, and I got it in a fine nib size. And I thought it was really cool that it was like a little pocket pen. It was nice and light, and when you post it, it was actually quite comfortable in my hand. And when you compare it to my Muji pen that I was using on a daily basis, this felt pretty similar in terms of width of the pen, and so I thought this would be a pretty decent first pen to try. It felt very comparable to my Muji pen, and I really loved it. So that was my first pen. I had this pen for a while. I loved writing with this pen. It wasn't quite as thin as the 0.38 Muji that I had grown quite accustomed to because I have small writing and I just prefer like a really fine nib. So I went to Wonder Pens to pick up my ink that I had decided I really wanted to try, and asked them to recommend a pen for me. And they recommended the LAMY Safari Cream, which ended up being the next pen that I added to my collection. They recommended this one because as much as I really liked this pocket pen, the fact that I had to twist it every time I wanted to use the pen, I know it's a really small detail, but I couldn't see this being a daily driver for me because I'm always taking notes and then taking a break, and it's not like whenever I write it's a continuous session. My pen usage is very much like start and stop, and so I really wanted something that would just be like a little easier to get started with. I also really loved the colorway of this pen because I just liked the fact that it was neutral, and therefore I felt like this could go with a lot of different types of ink. And so at the time I was really going for this neutral look, and I felt like this fit in really well with my Macchiato. So this is in the color cream. I got this in an extra fine nib. Another thing I really didn't like about this LAMY is this triangular shaped barrel. I really wanted to like it because it felt like, you know, kind of ergonomic, and I thought it'd be interesting to have like a guide of how to hold my pen, but I actually really hated it. And unfortunately, because of that, I don't reach for this pen that often. And so I went back to Wonder Pens to say, you know what, this pen has worked out in a lot of ways, but it's not for me. So I'd like to try maybe something else that will get me closer to that like muji experience. And I think it's really funny that I was trying so hard to match a plastic muji pen, but I had just been using that pen for so many years that I really wanted something that felt similar to it, but I could also change the ink depending on my mood. So that led me to my next purchase, which was this Pilot Metropolitan, and I got this in a medium nib. I will say at first glance, I really didn't like the look and feel of this pen. Compared to my neutral pens, I really wanted another like neutral pen that wasn't so like bright and in your face. And the reason why I ended up buying this pen was because once I actually tried it in the store, I fell in love with the way it wrote. And they explained to me the difference between like a Western nib and a Japanese nib. And up until that point, I had no idea that I had this preference, but as soon as I started writing with this pen, I was like, okay, I'm in love with the way these nibs feel, and I think I can overlook the body of this pen because the way it writes just feels so good. And so this was the first time I made a purchase that was purely functional, and I tried to overlook the aesthetics of the pen just because I enjoyed the writing experience so much. And while I maybe could have waited for another Pilot pen that was something that I preferred the look of, the price point was prohibitive for me, and this was a price point that worked for me, and I decided that I would give it a try. At the time, they had very low stock on their pens, and so while I really wanted to get a fine nib, they didn't have any in stock, and they did say to me, Japanese pen nibs tend to be thinner than Western nibs, so this medium is going to be more similar to Western fine. I have to admit, I didn't love it. Like, it was this metal, very cold pen, and you know, I like warm and cozy things, and this pen, as much as the writing experience was amazing, it just didn't feel very cozy. And while I realize how ridiculous that sounds, it meant that I wasn't in love with the pen. So even though I loved the writing experience of it, I guess I just felt like something was lacking, and that's why I didn't end my pen journey there. The next few pens that I purchased were probably in my starting to get a little bit out of control with my impulses, because I was still kind of experimenting with trying to figure out like what pen, what nib size was my ideal. The next two pens were continuing on in this sort of experimentation phase. I had this pen, I had this medium. I loved the writing experience, but I did not love the body of the pen, and I still wanted a nib that was a little bit thinner. So that led me to going back to Wonder Pens and seeing that they happened to have more pens in stock, because they had told me that they would eventually get more pens in stock. So I waited a few months and I went back. When I saw this pen, I still wouldn't say it's my favorite pen ever, but it kind of matched my neutral vibe that I was going for. So it was a little more neutral. I mean, I don't love this little band here. And more importantly, this was a fine nib. And so I was really excited about the prospect of having a finer nib, because I was using my Hobonichis. I have these really tiny grids, and I was just finding in general that I was wanting something finer. Again, like my Muji fine. And so I went home with this, and I still use this pen to this day. Right up until a few videos ago, I was using this for my Platinum Carbon Black ink, because this is one of my more affordable pens, and if I were to ruin the nib with that ink, I didn't think I was going to care so much. But I don't know, maybe I'm not filling these pens up properly or cleaning them properly, but every time I would use this pen, I would just somehow get ink all over my fingers despite filling it and trying to wipe them. So that's something that kind of drove me a little crazy in the end, but this is a really good pen. It's a very functional pen and I do enjoy it. This next pen I picked up purely for aesthetics. I was on this olive green kick, and when I saw this pen in olive green and gold, I impulsively purchased it. I don't have a better explanation than that. This was one of the first times where I started to make purchase decisions that were based on maybe emotion a little bit and not so much on function. Even though these were both fine nibs, I was really surprised that they both don't write the same way. And I don't know if that's because the gold tipped nib, because this isn't a gold nib, but it's like a gold color nib. I'm not exactly sure why they wrote differently. I have heard that sometimes Kaweco nibs can be inconsistent, so I don't know if it was just an inconsistent thing. But anyway, this is the Kaweco Collection in olive, and aesthetically, I just think these pens are so beautiful and I do really love them. But from a functional perspective, they're not my favorite pens, but I do keep them in my collection because I think for travel, they're really good. I like the fact that they're like fully sealed, and actually like keeping this pen in my wallet. Say like this is my beginner set of pens, and I actually kind of kept it this way for quite some time and didn't really have any plans on making any changes to this lineup, I would say. I had like kind of issues with each of these pens, but I was enjoying learning more about my writing preferences, and as I mentioned, they were working fine for what I wanted at the time, so I was quite satisfied with what I had. I would say like then I started making a couple of maybe not great purchases. I picked up a pen that I no longer have in my collection actually. It was the Scrix 419 fountain pen that I added on to my Galen leather purchase that I made last May when I was trying to find a cover for my cousin and my Hobonichi A5 5-year. I do regret that purchase because when I received the pen, it was another beige pen and it was gorgeous. Like, I actually still think it's a beautiful pen, but I just never ended up feeling like I had an opportunity to ink it up. And so it actually stayed unused for quite some time before I finally gifted it to someone else. And I really hope that person enjoys the pen. And I think that was the first time where I started to really shift my thinking from, okay, am I done experimenting? Like, have I learned enough to know what I could see myself using on a regular basis? And if I were to invest in something a little more high end, that I could see myself being the full package pen, combining all the different elements of these that I like into something that I will really enjoy using on a daily basis. I guess I kind of shifted from like experimentation to specific purpose or intention. So the next pen that I ended up picking up was this Kaweco Brass Sport. I would say this is kind of teetering on the edge of experimentation. What drew me to this pen was the fact that this pen would patina over time and become personalized to you as you use it, very much like getting a natural leather cover that patinas over time according to your usage of it. I was really attracted to the idea of having something similar in a pen format. So this was another pen that I thought would be useful for leaving the house with. It's very durable. I don't feel like I need to be too precious with it. And I do love the fact that over time, like this was really shiny when I first got it. It almost matched this clip that I purchased for it, but now you can see like it's starting to get darker with time. And this is a lovely pen. I did not like the nib that came with it though, so I did go to a local pen store and I purchased a new fine nib. Something I really do appreciate about these Kaweco pens is you can interchange the nibs really easily, and so instead of having to buy a new pen altogether when I want to try a different nib size, I have the option to just buy a new nib. So I feel like 3 is probably too many of the same type of pen, but I've made these investments, and if I ever feel like I want to try a different nib beyond the fine, extra fine that I tend to stay in, I would probably do it with these pens because it's relatively easy to swap them out. This was kind of like a really special pen for me from that perspective, and I adore this pen. And then after that is when I started to feel more comfortable investing in pens that I felt could check all the boxes that I really needed in terms of a functional pen, but also a pen that I really loved the look and feel of. So I'm gonna go ahead and put these away, and just in case you're wondering about these pens here, these were gifted to me by my parents when they realized that I was really getting into the fountain pen hobby. They dug up some of their old pens that they had saved from their school and working years. So these are very precious to me. I honestly don't know anything about them, so my plan is to do a little more research into them and see if there's a way that I can still use them. I do have one pen that I took to the Toronto Pen Store last October to see if someone there could try to restore the pen, and if they're able to do it, I will share it on the channel at a future date. That is probably my most sentimental pen that I'm attached to, but it may not be able to be restored because there's a part that needs to be completely replaced. So if I can't use it, it'll just be a pen that I cherish, but I'm not able to actually use. So anyway, that's what these 2 pens are for. I don't know anything about them. I don't know what the model is, what they're called. I don't know how to ink them. I honestly haven't done any research into them, but that is a project for another day. So I'm not going to talk about these. Okay, so this video is getting pretty long already. I'll just go over my daily driver pens next. Every pen that I have inked up and I'm using on a regular basis, lives in this pen wallet. I absolutely love this wallet so much. I've talked about it a lot. I use it every day, and it's just gotten so soft and buttery in the time that I've been using it that I just love it. My only hope is that it doesn't get too much darker than it already is, because I thought the colorway was perfect when I got it, and I have slight regrets in not buying the natural cover so that it could patina into a caramel brown over time, whereas this, I'm a little afraid it's going to get really, really dark, but we'll see. I started to get interested in the Pilot Vanishing Point because unfortunately with fountain pens, at least the ones I have, I learned pretty quickly that if I just left the cap off, then the pen would dry out and it would take a little bit of time for the ink to start flowing. So over time that became really annoying when I was trying to take notes really quickly. That kind of led me to looking into investing in my first clickable fountain pen. After doing a lot of research, I decided I wanted to try the Pilot Vanishing Point. And the reason why is because out of all the pens that I already owned, the Pilot nib was by far my favorite. And I loved the writing experience of my Metropolitan so much that I really just wanted to stay within the Pilot family. I tried to pick a colorway that I thought I could be happy with for a really long time, and that's what led me to this black and gold trim. Even though it's sort of a non-traditional pen, I mean, I kind of prefer the classic, like, you know, pen cap look, which I'll get to in a second. I can't deny the utility of a pen like this. It's just so convenient. And the only thing that I struggled with was, well, there were two. One was, did I want to go for the Decimo size, which was smaller, and I have kid hands, so I thought maybe that would be better, because I have heard the clip can be polarizing for people who use this pen. And then the other thing was, did I want to get an extra fine or a fine? And if you do any research online, you will see it is also a polarizing topic, where some people think the extra fine is way too fine and it feels like you're writing with like a toothpick, whereas other people swear by it and love it. And so I went to Wonder Pens, of course, to try the pens in person before I made any decisions. I absolutely fell head over heels in love with this pen. It was just beautiful. It felt so good in my hand. The only problem was they didn't have the extra fine in stock. And maybe this is where my impulse got the better of me, but I wanted this pen so badly, and I thought the fine would be okay enough that when I tried the fine in store, I was actually quite pleased with it. So I went home with this pen and absolutely loved it. But when I started using certain inks, I just found that it was writing more broad than my fine Metropolitan. And that's when I kind of started to learn the difference between like a gold nib and a steel nib, I think. So I didn't anticipate that difference. I didn't realize there was going to be that level of variation in the pen, and this sounds so specific and kind of silly, but that is the reality. And so I love this pen so much. I love the way it writes, but I still just wanted something a little finer. And I think that's where my obsession started to get into the dangerous territory, where I realized that there's a certain point where I could just keep trying to always find the perfect pen, the perfect width, the perfect nib. So I decided to just not do anything about it. And I decided to leave it for the time being and just enjoy this pen and experiment with different types of inks. So I started experimenting with drier inks to see if that would make the line finer, and it did work, but of course then the pen just didn't feel as lovely to write with as it did with, say, like a Pilot Irishizuku ink, which is like a very juicy, beautiful ink to write with. And so I would say like this is still my favorite pen in my entire collection, apart from this other pen that my dad gifted to me, because that one, for sentimental reasons, is probably another favorite of mine. So this was my perfect pen. This is the pen that I used every day when I was taking notes, every time I was on calls. It just worked out so well, and it has been my favorite investment by far out of all my pens. And I suppose if I had to get rid of all my other pens, this is the one that I would keep. So I wasn't actually planning on adding new pens to my collection at that point. I felt like I was just done. And I did look into buying an extra fine nib for this pen as a potential replacement. But one day I met a friend at Wonder Pens, and that's always a dangerous thing to do when you have impulse control issues. But while we were there, we were actually looking at pens for her partner, and I happened to see a Pilot Decimo in their display case. And the thing is, Decimos are hard to get in Canada. I think there's something about the distribution that make it just a bit harder for Canadian retailers to stock Pilot Decimo. So I never actually had a chance to try that pen out in my hand when I went into Wonder Pens. Not only was this Decimo there for me to try it out, but it was an extra fine nib. And so that is this pen that you are looking at right now. I didn't plan on buying this pen, but they actually offered me a discount for it because it was a special order from another customer who then changed their minds. And so it was actually a lot cheaper than it would have been if I had just tried to buy it online. I decided to take this pen home with me. I have no regrets because I actually do really love the extra fine nib. For the longest time, I would say these two pens together have really sustained my daily pen usage. Surprisingly, I prefer the feel of the Vanishing Point, but I really love this pen as well. And since swapping the extra fine nib into this pen, I just feel like now this continues to be my favorite pen of all time. I'm almost done. I have just a few more pens to go. The next two pens, I would say they fall into the slight impulse category, but I don't have regrets, and I use them every day. So they are part of my daily rotation. And those two pens are my Sailor Pro Gear Slim Shikiori in the Kiku color. This is just like when I think of a classic pen and what it should look like, it's a Sailor Pro Gear Slim. The utility of this pen is undeniable, which is why it's my favorite pen. But in terms of longer journaling sessions, just really good classic pens, it's something that looks like this. It's just a cap, gold trim, and a beautiful nib. I ended up picking up these two pens from Yoseka Stationery. I had a discount code, and when I hit a certain threshold, I got free shipping. So this felt extremely indulgent. And up until my most recent purchase, I considered my collection done. This is the Pro Gear Slim Line Friends in brown, and it is the extra fine, which I love. I love this extra fine so much. And then this one is the fine, which I also really love. If I ever did want to get another Sailor, I would probably try a medium fine out of curiosity, but my curiosity isn't so great that I'm actually actively planning on acquiring a new pen. I'm just saying, if I were to get a new one, that's probably what I would do. I love these pens so much, and when it comes to long writing sessions, these are the ones that I'm reaching for. I just adore them. And the feel of these pens are wildly different, which is wonderful. So this is like smooth, like feels like I'm skating on an ice rink. And then these have this feel of that mechanical pencil when you're writing on paper, which I love so much for different reasons. Writing with these pens just bring me so much joy. The last pen I'm going to talk about is the most recent one that I've added to my collection. So this is a Pilot Vanishing Point in a medium nib. I probably could have tried to branch out from other pen brands beyond Pilot and Sailor, but I knew that I liked Japanese style nibs, and frankly, I didn't really want to venture out because I know it's kind of a slippery slope, and if I suddenly try other brands, then my impulse might go a little crazy and I might start wanting a bunch of different pens, and I really just wanted a medium nib to be able to showcase more ink properties in some of the inks that I'm trying out. I did consider getting a Pilot nib instead of the pen as well, but I use these two pens on a daily basis as it is, and I felt like it would be better value if I got a new pen body for it. So this one also felt a little bit indulgent, but I did have a gift certificate for Wonder Pens. I bought this pen very recently. I've been using it every day. I absolutely love it. And now I consider my pen collection complete. Here's my entire pen collection. I currently have no plans on adding new pens to this collection. I also have no plans on getting rid of any of these pens. And I would say these ones are constantly inked all the time, and they all have specific uses. And these ones I rotate a little bit. So sometimes with my shimmer inks, I'll use this pen. This one often gets used and this one lives in my wallet. So anyway, I have talked a really long time. I'm going to wrap up this video. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I'd love to know if you have any of these pens or what your experience has been like. What is the state of your fountain pen collection, and what type of collector or user do you consider yourself to be? Otherwise, thank you so much for being here, and I will see you soon in the next video, which will be part 2, where I talk about how I've been managing my collection and some of the strategies that I've been using to try to control my impulsivity when it comes to getting into hobbies like this. All right, well, thanks so much, and I'll see you soon in the next one. Bye!